On June 17th of this year, Bill C-14 was passed, which made medically assisted death legal in this country, an issue we have kept you up to date on for quite some time. Well, today I'm joined by Rick Hiemstra from the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada with an update on the latest. Hi, Rick.
Hi.
So tell us about what the current law says.
The current law allows physician-assisted death for those who are in an advanced state of disease or disability, who are in an irreversible decline or capability, and whose death is reasonably foreseeable.
And so there's talk of reviewing this, which is kind of basically they've said you have to review this within 180 days, or start reviewing this law within 180 days, and that has started.
Yeah, just back up in February of this year when they were crafting the legislation, there was a special joint committee report that recommended that physician-assisted death be extended for mature minors, for those with mental illness, or those who provided advance directives. And so that didn't come into the legislation because the EFC and disability groups and others argued against it. But what they did put in the legislation was a requirement that 180 days later, which would be December 14th, 2016, that at that point they study extending physician-assisted death to those groups. And now they'll have 2 years after the study starts to report back to Parliament and possibly make recommendations.
So explain that again. So mature minors, explain the reviews that they would like to look at.
So mature minors is a vague idea.
Okay.
People debate what a mature minor means, and in different cases the courts will sometimes designate someone as a mature minor. Very contextual. In the Joint Committee report, as young, they were suggesting as young as 13 or 14, be able to make those decisions. So there's that. Those with mental illness, this would include people with depression or other kinds of mental illness. And then the advance directives would be people who, say, made a living will that said, if I get to this point in my life, I would like to essentially have a doctor kill me.
And we've heard of a number of cases. Well, I can think of one off the top of my head of a young man who I believe is in his early 20s, who has gone through some depression and has said that he would like access to medically assisted dying. But there is one case in particular in BC of a 25-year-old woman by the name of Julia, and she has spinal muscular atrophy, and she is challenging these restrictions as well.
Yeah, so Julia's doing this with the BC Civil Liberties Association, and what they're challenging is the provision in the law that says your death must be reasonably foreseeable. So if their court challenge is successful, they would strike down the portion of the law that says you have to be close to death.
Now explain reasonably foreseeable, because that's a big term.
So again, this is a term that is contextual, it's open to interpretation, and it is something right now that gets decided by doctors or if there's a legal challenge in the courts.
Okay, so what Julia is saying is that my pain is so chronic, or I have chronic pain, that I would like to die. My death is not foreseeable right now,
That's right.
but I'm in so much pain that I would like to die.
That is what she's asking.
Okay. Now you have released, or EFC has released, this great booklet, which I would challenge all of our viewers to get. We'll tell you a little bit more in a few minutes of how you can get this. And this really delves into the conversation of euthanasia and palliative care. Because what we've talked about here on the show a number of times is that palliative care has really not been talked about as much when it comes to medically assisted dying. First of all, explain to us what palliative care is.
So when we have this debate, usually what people talk about is pain, but we're also talking about pain and suffering, and these are different things. Our doctors are very good at managing pain. Suffering is a little bit different. It's the spiritual, psychosocial, physical aspects of the situation that someone might be facing. And this is a place where churches, community groups, families can really step in and help people. And palliative care is designed to help minister to the whole person, not just the pain aspect. And often when people say, I want to end my life, it's because of the suffering. It's part of the loneliness, the isolation that comes with facing end-of-life questions about who am I, what comes beyond.
Yeah. You had some great stats in this book as well. It says 16 to 30% of Canadians have access to palliative care, but 90% could benefit from palliative care. Explain that.
Well, when we're talking about extending choice to people for physician-assisted death, it's not really a choice if you don't have a choice for something else. And we think at the EFC that it's the wrong question to be talking about extending access to physician-assisted death at a time when Canadians don't have access, most Canadians don't have access to quality palliative care.
Do you think the common Canadian actually knows what palliative care is? Because I don't think they do.
I can't speak to that specifically, but I do think that when people think about the end of their lives, they're usually thinking of an end to their life that doesn't include palliative care. And this is part of what I think a lot of people are very afraid of.
So you mean the conversation hasn't been, they haven't had a conversation with their medical professional about this other option?
That's right.
So how could we as the church change that?
Well, there's a number of things that I think you can do. The first thing I think you can do is educate yourself, and you can go to EFC's website and find out about that. You can get a copy of this booklet that on euthanasia and palliative care that you held up a minute ago. The next thing you can do, knowing that we have this period of a 2-year study, take the time to visit your MP. They are very responsive to what their constituents say. Let them know that you oppose extending physician-assisted death to those who are mentally ill, those mature minors, those with advanced directives, and give them a reason for the hope. Do this really respectfully. Also, just as important, ask them to extend palliative care benefits across the country, to do what they can to do that. And then finally, I think as Christians, we have to step up and say, what can we do to help alleviate the suffering of those that are facing the end of their lives? So this might be, could your church start a hospice? Could your church with other churches in your community start a hospice? Could you help with home care? What can you do to help ease the suffering of those with mental illness? It's just going to be so important. If we are asking people to consider palliative care, we need to make sure that we are there offering it.
You brought up a good point about, if we backtrack a little as well, talking to our MP about increasing maybe benefits to palliative care, because there aren't a lot of palliative care facilities right now as well in our country.
That's right, and where they do exist in the country, they tend to be more in the urban areas rather than the rural areas. And there's a tremendous opportunity for ministry then, for communities where these don't exist, for the church to sort of step into the gap and to love their neighbors.
Yeah, I think of the scripture where Jesus talks about, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me something to drink? When I was lonely, did you visit me? And I think we have to remember that, how important it is to, when we're talking about being the hands and feet of Jesus, that means also loving those that are dying in those moments, and also making people not feel like they're a burden, I think is very important.
It is so important what we do with our lives, because we teach other people. One of the things that the news media tends not to do is to report on suicides. And the reason they do that is because they know when they do that other people tend to copy them. And so we signal the value of other people's lives with how we value our own. And we are made in the image of God. We are loved by God. And we have responsibilities to others and to God with what we do and how we cherish our lives and what we do with them.
Yeah. This is such a great resource. And again, the link is at the bottom of your screen where you can sign up and ask for a copy. One could be sent to our viewers.
It's a free copy.
Great. And again, it's called Euthanasia and Palliative Care, a guide for Canadians. Thanks again, Rick.
Thank you.